Nebraska. Crazy talk, I know. So I'm going to go through a little bit. This specific talk is about what the boomer generation and elder are kind of dealing with right now. So that's the population you guys will mostly see, and then old Gen Xers like me will eventually age into it. So please do ask any questions if you have them. So can you imagine? You see that we have couples here that are probably in their 70s. Imagine, like, close your eyes. Imagine that first time you met, like, the person you love, and that, like, butterfly feeling, you know, that, like, what could happen? It's going to be amazing kind of feeling. And then think about, like, all the times that you've spent with them. Your first date, is there a marriage proposal? Maybe. Did you purchase a home? Do you have kids? My goodness. That is tricky. You were correct. So that feeling of like excitement and connection and love, all of those things, those emotions, exhale them out and think about that path of life that you have with your family, your partners, your husbands and wives. And then think about being 70 years old, and I tell you that you and your partner cannot live together in a senior living. And I tell you, you probably won't be able to get into senior living because there's discrimination, or maybe there's a religious policy, or maybe nobody on staff understands what LGBTQ folks go through. That happens every single day. We're going to talk a little bit about this demographic and what they've gone through. You probably have been out in the world and seen LGBTQIA2S+. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, asexual. Two-spirit is a Native American term that just means we have spirits of both genders living in one body. So you will see a lot of Native American folks kind of using that term instead. And then queer specifically encompasses anybody who's not cisgender, which means that you sort of embrace the gender of the body you were born into, or straight, which means that you have a heterosexual relationship. So there's a lot of acronym jumble in this population. Older folks, probably above 60, do not appreciate the word queer. It just isn't part of their zeitgeist. They feel like it's too blankety, too young. So that's just a FYI. Does anybody have any questions about acronym jumble?
What do they prefer?
Go ahead and say what they are. Let them identify that to you. In Omaha, most of my friends that I know will literally tell you we are a gay couple, a lesbian couple. As you guys move through your careers at ENOA and you start to get some of those Gen Y, older millennial folks, they will start adding queer, intersex, possibly polyamory, that kind of thing. That's very uncommon right now. So, thank you for the question. Amazing. License to discriminate. I'm going to play video, and the amazing Danielle has already got it pulled up. How about them apples? Hopefully you can hear this. Luckily it's just music right now.
Care of ourselves. When it comes to some of the most essential things in life, living with dignity and the peace of mind that comes with knowing
We don't have more just did. Yeah.
I'm just gonna reopen it real quick.
I promise the rest of the talk will be more interesting than your insurance talk later.
So when you go out of here, we're just gonna go to slideshow, you go from current slides, so you can start right here.
As we grow older, we share many of the same concerns. When we have enough to retire, who will take care of us if we can't take care of ourselves? When it comes to some of the most essential things in life, living with dignity and the peace of mind that comes with knowing that we or our loved ones can get the care they need, no one should ever have to worry that they'll be turned away simply because of who they are. In most states, our laws don't protect LGBT people from discrimination in places of public accommodation, like nursing homes and assisted care facilities. And that's scary. For a lot of people, entering a long-term care facility can be a frightening and vulnerable experience. Do we really want to give these facilities a right to tell people we don't want your kind here? To hurt and reject them at the very moment they need reassurance, care, and compassion? We all have enough to worry about as we age, without having to worry if we'll be treated with dignity. Let's update the law to ensure that everyone is protected from discrimination, so that no one can be denied care or a place to live when they need it most.
So clearly that was created so that you would feel in the hearts what that was. But I just spoke to a gentleman 2 weeks ago who had that exact situation happen to him. Rolled in a wheelchair. We won't be able to accommodate your partner of 35 years in our facility. I'm not going to name the facility because it really doesn't matter, because this is pretty widespread. So this is an ad by SAGE, which is a national group that helps LGBTQ elders, older adults as they say, with resources, with policy work, that kind of thing. But I'll tell you that the founder of Owlish, Heather, called SAGE and said, I would love to bring your services here to Nebraska. And after quite a bit of talk, what they said to her was, gosh, you know, we're really concentrating on the coasts. The Midwestern folks maybe don't need us as much. So I could tell by the laughing in the room that that's ridiculous. So that was sort of the impetus to get Owlish going, right? We need this kind of policy work, this kind of information here. So, you know, this poor gentleman in the video, obviously, now what does he do? He has benefits, he could go, but, you know, and I think that the reason that it's excellent to talk to you folks is because these are the people you see every day. And maybe it's not just being LGBTQ, maybe it's another intersectionality. And if you are LGBTQ and also disabled and also Latino and don't speak English, that more intersectionalities you add, the less likely it is that you're going to be able to find senior care. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about these boomers and kind of what they've been through. Who here is familiar with Stonewall? Heyo. All right. So the Stonewall riots were in New York, 1969, in June. It was common policy at the time for the NYPD to over and over bust the gay clubs when they needed money for their programs. So they'd leave it alone, and then they'd be like, we're short on dollars. Let's bust it. All these people will pay fines, and now we'll have some more money. You know, it is what it is. Hopefully those days are over, but very common. This is the 33rd year anniversary of Stonewall. It's really common for you to see Marsha P. Johnson, who was a transgender person, transgender activist, African-American lady. She is kind of the face of Stonewall. So it wasn't just, you know, affluent white folks that were being busted. It was people who had many intersectionalities, Latino, Black, all of those things. So, and then we have the AIDS epidemic, and this is the generation that had to make it through that. As you probably remember, some of you folks who are my age, it was the gay disease, remember that? And only gay men could get it. So we know now that that is ridiculously incorrect. They found out in 1984 that there were heterosexual partners that were contracting AIDS. Obviously treatment has helped, but it was because of heterosexual people getting AIDS that treatment existed. And that kind of tells you what you need to know about living in the 80s. So when hetero-female partners got it, that's when they started researching it, and there were a lot of very prominent folks, Nancy Reagan and Elizabeth Taylor and so forth, attached to that. That's how anything happened with AIDS. If it had stayed a gay disease, one wonders if any cure or any treatment would have been found, which is kind of nauseating if you think about it. By the end of the 80s, there were 10 million people with AIDS. In 1999, 14 million had died from AIDS. It's very likely that the older LGBTQ folks will have lost maybe half of their friends at that time to AIDS, or they may have lost them to going back in the closet. That is a very common reaction to the AIDS epidemic, would be, I'm removing myself completely from who I am, and I'm gonna distance myself. And now we have marriage equality, which was hard won, right? Hard won. 2013, I personally know a couple that got married in 2013 on the steps of the White House, and they had been together for 54 years. But finally were able to get the benefits of being married, which I know everyone in this room gets that, right? You can finally do Social Security benefits, military benefits, veterans and so forth. And it's a massive big deal because many of these elder folks do not have family to take care of them. So I'm going to attempt to do another video. Minimizing. Can we just say that to the left, the desktop?
No, we can just
Just end all of them? The PowerPoint itself.
so if we just go to the slideshow, it should be there. And then
Go back to it. Okay.
that's on the slide. So
Okay.
when you go to
It may become obvious to many of you that I have literally not been in an office for over 4 years. Okay, we're gonna play this little tiny one here.
Gauges. So do lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. LGBT older adults face the same challenges as other older adults, including financial worries and health concerns. But LGBT older adults face additional challenges. Let's compare two women, Tina and Jackie, who were both born in 1947. In 1967 at college, Tina meets Frank, and Jackie meets Francis. On a date with Francis after work, Jackie is seen by a coworker who tells their boss. Jackie is legally fired and takes a lesser-paying job at a factory. In 1973, Tina marries Frank, but Jackie is unable to marry Francis. In the 80s, Tina and Frank have children, but Jackie and Francis are barred from adopting. After decades of hard work, in 2010, Frank and Francis retire. Tina takes Social Security spousal benefits. But because the federal government didn't recognize same-sex marriages then, Jackie is denied those benefits. In 2015, right before the freedom to marry becomes available nationwide, Frank and Francis die. Tina pays for her in-home care with her Social Security survivor benefits and funds from Frank's pension. Jackie is denied Social Security survivor benefits, and because she was not a legal spouse, is also denied Frances's pension. Their apartment was rented in Frances's name, and her state lacks non-discrimination protections in housing, so Jackie is evicted when she tries to change the lease into her name. Lacking an income and a place to live, Jackie moves into a nursing home and relies on Medicaid to pay for it. She fears discrimination if she shares stories about her past, so she doesn't talk about her life with Frances. Tina can afford in-home nursing care and has the support of her children. After a lifetime of discrimination, LGBT older adults face economic insecurity, poorer health, and reduced support networks. Find out more about the unique disparities facing LGBT older adults.
That was a very resonant audio right there. Goodness gracious. We'll go to the next one. All right. Does anybody in this room, has anybody encountered an elder who has dealt with something like this? And what can you do for them? Not much. Yeah, exactly. In the state of Nebraska, with the exception of Omaha and Lincoln, it is still illegal to be fired for being gay. The discrimination is, it's just there, it's in every policy, just, a little bit. This is a statistic that kind of stuns me. 40% of LGBTQ older adults report that their primary care health providers do not know they are gay.
Oh, that's scary.
Because they're afraid to come out to them. So there's obviously some education needed there as well. Members of the LGBTQ community obviously are less likely to have children, although that is changing. That is changing. But the elders in this generation, very likely. There's no child care. And many of them were rejected by their parents, so they don't have those like auxiliary cousin type folks. I'll tell a personal anecdote. I was president of the RCMC gay choir here, and my dad, who's currently 87 years old, came to the choir, and people just flocked to him. So we left, and my dad, being an introvert, was like, why are people talking to me? And I said, because you're the same age as their parents would be, and they don't have any parental figures in their lives. They literally don't have family. So the whole idea of making your own family kind of comes actually from the LGBTQ if you look historically. More likely to be single later in life. No free care. No free care from your family. Nobody stopping in to make sure you have food. Nobody making sure you take your medication, that kind of thing. Every time, as you, I'm sure, know, you have to count on a stranger to do something for you that's a basic life need, that dignity level kind of just starts to drop. They don't know how to talk to you. They don't know what to say to you. And then do you come out to them? Do you say the reason there's nobody around is because I'm gay? Maybe, maybe not, They're obviously, this generation is quite socially isolated. As you know from COVID, being isolated is painful when you don't want it. If you're an introvert, COVID was your jam. But for everyone else, it was really awful. And that's just a little taste of what it's like to be an LGBTQ elder for most elders. And then as you age, sadly, your friends die. 20% of LGBTQ adults don't have anyone to call if there was a crisis, an emergency, anything. 8% of senior housing offers services targeted to LGBTQ people. That's 8%, which is horrific. And then if you add, I'm LGBTQ and I only speak Spanish or newer or Hmong, nobody has services for you. LGBTQ individuals are twice as likely to live in poverty as their peers of the same age. 70% of LGBTQ elders have an income of $20,000 or less, unless they have a pension. As we know, I'll never have a pension. that's kind of something that very few companies offer now, so. And then we have rural folks, which are people, I grew up in Red Oak, Iowa. I knew there were gay people there. They're certainly not out. 3 to 5% of the rural population identifies as LGBTQ, but almost none of them are out. They kind of get by, and they're the fun uncle who lives out on the farm, that guy, you know? But what if he falls? Literally no one goes to check on him. There's less access to care, almost no access to transportation, especially if you live in the boonies. It's a little frightening. The gentleman up here in the upper right-hand corner is named Eli Rigatuzo. He is an Omaha native and a Two-Spirit member of the Menominee Nation. He's also a photographer, and he works at Bellevue. So I wanted to read you his statement about this. As a transgender man, my biggest fear is to end up in memory care at a facility because I have genitalia that is most commonly associated with females. I will likely be misgendered or called by a name I do not use anymore. All of my legal documents have been changed, but that does not keep me safe. Even now with all of my mental faculties, I get misgendered everywhere I go. I want to be treated with dignity and respect and be seen and honored for the person I am, regardless of my mental state. I believe all healthcare organizations should be taking time to educate themselves on this community, what it means to be transgender, and the importance of respecting pronouns. LGBTQ is no longer a mental illness. It was considered a mental illness till when? Yeah. Nobody knew that. I didn't know that until I started doing some research, right? If you could be legally diagnosed with gayness up until the 80s, late 80s actually. It's kind of horrifying. So that is that. Does anybody have questions about sort of what's happening right now? Okay. So leaders in inclusion right now, SAGE, which we already mentioned, who apparently only thinks gay people live on the coast, but they do a lot of policy work. They do a lot of pushing bills and things like that, which is helpful, right? It saves people a lot of energy and money if you have a national organization that's willing to do that. There is a company called Fenway Health. Has anybody interacted with Fenway Health? Okay. It was part of the free clinic movement in the early 70s. They believe that healthcare is a right, not a privilege. So if we pull the political overtones of that away, they're simply saying that everybody deserves to be able to have a doctor. So their mission is to enhance the well-being of the gay community, basically. And they run what's called the LGBTQ aging process, which is trying to get a number. How many people here know how many gay adults over the age of 50 live in Omaha? How many?
One.
That's it?
One that's out.
Right. If you look at the census data and the likelihood of someone being LGBTQ in this country, there could be as many, I did this calculation, as 27,468 LGBTQ adults over 50 in Omaha. There is no protection for them. When they go into senior care, when they start to look for home health, anything like that, there are no policies in most of the places in Omaha that will assist them in being identified correctly. And of course, our lovely census does not count them. So that is part of our mission as well, but I'll get to that in a minute. In the Midwest right now, in the Omaha, Nebraska area, inclusive communities, Heartland Pride and Out Nebraska are probably the best sources until now of information and help for LGBTQ elders. She has on here, this is kind of a sales deck, so I'll just say, for some agencies, marketing to the LGBTQ community could be lucrative and get you more customers, but I don't really want to talk about monetizing people's experiences at the moment, so I'm going to skip that. And then there are trainings. Currently, SAGE has a 4-hour inclusivity training for elders you can kind of do online. And then there's they have an hour-long training on sort of equality index work, which I'm going to tell you what that is here in a second. And that's kind of it. So there are individual senior communities that have anti-bias training in their community. I will say, looking at it, it's about 20 years behind the times. My other job is as a strategy consultant, and I work a lot in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I recently looked at a guidebook for a company here in Omaha that still had the word transvestite in it. That is very, very outdated. Is not commonly a word that's used. So there's a lot of work to do. Okay, so basically, the Long-Term Equality Index is a joint venture of SAGE and the Human Rights Campaign. They are asking LGBTQ elders to take a pledge, which is very short, and it has to do with basically pledging to support your community. You do a self-assessment that talks about exactly where you are in the demographic stream, what your needs are, what you anticipate your future needs are, and what your support is. And then they're using that to build education and training. So this is really good. There are almost no Midwestern participants. And I personally believe that people in our area have kind of different needs. You can't walk a block and get to somewhere here, you know. Does anybody have questions about this? I do. There's a reference on the back of this deck, and I'll be happy to send it to everybody, that has all of the information on how to get to all these places. Okay. There's our beautiful couple. There are currently estimated 3 million LGBTQ older adults in the United States, and again, nobody knows how many are in Nebraska. It will be double by 2030. So for those of you who plan to have longevity with this organization, this is important information to have ready to go. It's probably underestimated, but that also, to me, is sort of ameliorated by the idea that a lot of these folks are not out of the closet. So it kind of just depends on whether they decide or not. When I say intersectionality, does that resonate with people? It simply means that you are a member of more than one marginalized community. And the more you stack on marginalization, the more likely it is that you have no benefits, no help, no programs that respond to you particularly. Okay. LGBTQ folks are more likely to have dementia, and I'll give you an actual statistic here in a second. They are at increased risk of subjective cognitive decline compared to cisgender heterosexual Americans. And it primarily is because of increased rates of depression, obesity, alcohol and tobacco, lower rates of preventative screening, because remember, we don't trust our doctors, and cardiovascular disease and HIV/AIDS. And all of those things, 100%, it will start cognitive decline sometimes, as you know. You probably know more about that than me by far. There is LGBTQ adults over 60. There's a 7.6% prevalence rate for cognitive decline in those folks. And again, no services around what do we do with someone who has dementia but is also a same-sex partner. Okay. I'm going to do one more. I'm ending the slideshow. I might do it right this time, and the tech gods will smile.
want to make sure that the care that we're providing people in a healthcare setting is culturally competent, that we're attuned to who they are. There's a difference between race and ethnicity, geography, linguistic experience, life experience.
It's important that the doctor understand where you're coming from and not be judgmental.
Because who I am affects my health. And if you don't know me, then you don't know the information that I need. It's an important part for anybody to feel comfortable and to know that this doctor is for you.
And if there's any doctor that has a tough time with who I am, my likes, dislikes, adios, I'm not going to come back.
Well, I had a story of an older lesbian. For years and years, her doctor would write her a prescription for birth control. And that doctor didn't really know her. She didn't feel comfortable and safe coming out to him. And had they actually had a more open conversation, he would have understood who she was, how she was living her life, and how to direct the healthcare so that it's a little more attuned to what she needs.
Being in the closet is not a good place to be in the health field because you are leaving out a lot of the important services that you need to have in order to have quality of life.
For today's older LGBT folks, although they're living in a world now that is much more open and accepting than they ever imagined they would experience, they still had decades of experiences where there was distrust, discrimination, hostility. For many of those people, being invisible really was the smartest way to get through your life.
Having the facility trained, it really has changed the culture. Although I didn't think we were unfriendly before, people are much more open and excited to participate in activities that include everybody.
I think it helps people to just be attuned to other folks, to not make all those assumptions that we make.
We tend to think of elderly people as sexless or not interested in sex anymore.
I've never had a physician ask me about my sexual activity, and if a physician don't,
Buffering is everybody's best friend.
ask those kinds of questions, people will never get the services that they need.
The training is helping us to be more aware of how to ask these questions of our elders, how to discuss them around the team. That aspect of training has had a huge impact on people, as well as components around language, using words.
Even the internet is biased.
Chant transgender, what does that mean? Cisgender, what does that mean? Bisexual, what does that mean?
And for me, because I wasn't too familiar with it, I feel that it's my responsibility to learn as much as I can so I could take care of them the best I could and educate my coworkers, my friends, and talk to them about what I know.
One of the things that we hear over and over again is
Pause
providers
it,
saying,
and see if it
well, it doesn't
will
matter to me, I'm not going to do anything
reorient
different.
itself.
Do anything different. But what we hear from older adults is it means the world to them to be known, to not have to be censoring themselves, to not have to worry about, oh, I'm going to say the wrong thing, I'm going to reveal this, and they're going to treat me harshly.
The training that Sage has given to the doctors has helped a lot.
I'm going to stop there. The rest of that is talking about the specifics of the training. Well, I'm going to X out of all that. Okay. When you think of culturally competent care, what kind of things come to mind? Not just for LGBTQ folks, but for anybody. Anybody? What?
Why are you looking at me?
Because you are so expressive, your entire thought process is on your head. Yes?
Don't be afraid to ask questions instead of just assuming things.
Yeah. Who here would be comfortable asking someone what their sexual orientation was? Nice. Nice. Okay. There are ways to kind of make that less uncomfortable, which is part of why Owlish is in existence. On this next slide, these are resources that are currently available to you. And again, I'll have the slide deck, Jeff has it. Be able to just download these and look at them. It's really important to be able to have those conversations, but it's also important to kind of be sensitive, because you may be the first person under the age of 30 that this person has come out to, or something like that. It's a scary situation going into senior care or any kind of senior services anyway, because boom, I suddenly am not independent anymore, right? So there are ways to have those kind of conversations that are not so, I don't know, I'm gonna say like confrontational almost, where you're like, tell me. Yeah, I know that you folks have a zillion probably hours of education on how not to do that. But that is not the case when it comes to senior care often. So here's the references. And now we have Owlish. Owlish, the idea of Owlish came about 5 years ago to our founder, Heather. And again, she kind of thought about it. She's been in senior care for 20 years. And she thought maybe, you know, this is something I can get involved with here. And again, she talked to Sage, and that was a no-go. So she started her own thing. Owlish started last summer. I joined as a board member. We have now got our 501c3 and a little soupçon of a budget. So I have changed to executive director. My background is in strategy and communication, so hopefully I'll do an okay job. But what our plan is here is kind of threefold. One of the board members, Dr. Carrie Candrian, is a professor at the University of Denver Medical Center. She is specifically, her whole practice, all of her research is on LGBTQ elder care. So she and I are going to sit down and write a curriculum, probably several curriculums, let's be real, for senior living facilities, those kind of things. So I'll do a presentation like this for them that's more targeted on what their needs are as a facility. We're also looking at the kind of policy protections that you need, well, anyone needs, frankly, to protect you from bias. As a fat woman, I cannot tell you how much bias I have encountered at the doctor's office, even though all of my blood work is perfect. I have been tested 3 times, blood tested in the same appointment because they didn't believe I didn't have diabetes. And that's just me. I can articulate what I need. I can say, let's stop this. When you're already in the closet, maybe you don't feel comfortable doing that, or if you have started down a cognitive decline road, you certainly can't ask for what you need. So we're talking about how do we support, for instance, legislation. As a 501c3, we cannot sponsor legislation, but we can let people know it's there and really push it. So we're talking about policies, right? That is part of the work I do in my other job, so that will be great. And then we do a lot of meeting the elders in the community. We have a monthly event called a Stonewall Social, and we have so far brought in, for instance, an estate lawyer to talk to them about putting together the correct paperwork. Because honestly, like for instance, you folks, your hands can be tied if the paperwork is not right. If it has not been put into place in time, your tools are less if it's not legal, so to speak. I will be talking to them about the new vocabulary of aging. There are a lot of changes in Medicare and things that affect this generation, so that's coming up later. If you want to come, there's a meet and greet with me, who you've already met and greeted, at the end of this month. But our board members will also be there. And we'll be at every Pride this summer. And what we want to find out is, what do you actually need? These folks haven't been surveyed. Maybe we think they need X, Y, Z, but what they need is something completely different. So we'll do a lot of fact finding. I've got a super fun and hopefully lucrative fundraiser planned for the fall. That is on September 30th, if anybody is interested in a cabaret. And then we'll have a strategy meeting with our survey findings And to that will be the board, myself, and then we're inviting community members to be a part of that as well, and set strategy for the next 1 to 5 years. So a lot of exciting things happening, and in the midst of that, as you probably are all aware, I have to get money for us. So that will be the other part of my job. We're really, really excited, and I'm so glad I'm here. It's really nice. Like, I'm looking around the room and I see either super tired, like I have not had enough coffee, or I see smiles, which is a thumbs up. So that's where we're at. Heather, the founder, has transitioned to president of the board. We are currently co-parenting Owlish. But I think there's a lot of good things you'll hear from us more this year. And certainly, if you need any resources, I have them all. So definitely email me or call me. I'd be happy to talk to you.
And Mitch is taping this presentation, and you'll send it to everybody, I assume.